So please give a round of applause to the observer of Cosmos, Martin Vejmelka.
Well, good morning. Great to be here. Such a great turnout at the Gateway conference. I hope you guys are having fun. So my talk's about decentralization, and the motto and thesis of the entire talk is that I'd like to keep in mind is decentralization takes work. Right? So let's begin with a few theses that we have on this. So first of all, blockchains aren't as decentralized as we'd like. They are not as independent of third-party influences, and therefore maybe less resilient than people think. And we think we need to pay attention to these issues, especially if TVL on the chains goes up. And I think a time is coming where blockchains will be required to show decentralization or display that they're actually in a good place in terms of neutrality and being able to support high-value assets. And as time goes on, also, stakeholders and maybe regulators will be looking at different stakeholders of the chain and asking them, hey, are you supporting decentralization of the chain? How are you doing that? Is this happening or not? Where are you with the state? So the main problem with decentralization is it's really unnatural. Natural is decentralization. That's the typical thing that happens all the time. And typically, if you're good at something, you can do more of it, you can do it more effectively, you can sell a better product, you get more money, you get more influence. If you are already big, you have a bigger advertising budget, you can attract more customers, you grow big. In fact, centralization is how Web 2 makes money. You go on TikTok, your friend goes TikTok, all their friends want to go on TikTok, right? That's the main point. So what we're trying to do with Web3 is actually really hard, and it's going against this trend. And it is kind of like the main selling point that we have here. We are claiming that these networks are decentralized. We are claiming we want to make them neutral. And it's not at all easy. You can't just toss out a code base and say, that's going to solve my problems. And there are many ways in which centralizations can happen, and we at RockawayX are focusing on some of these and trying to understand them and map them out to facilitate discussions in the community. And one centralization point, very obviously, companies that operate validators on the infrastructure level. One company can operate one validator, it could be a very big one, got some examples over there, or they could operate multiple validators, right? They could have white labeling operations, so in fact, the company has more influence than we're thinking. Another point of centralization is service providers. Obviously, validators have to make decisions, where to buy service, how to provide the best service to the blockchain, and individually they're weighing these pros and cons, like who's better, who's not. Obviously, if there's a service provider that's more efficient, that provides good service better than everybody else, then individually all these validators are going to make a decision. Lots of them might make a decision. I'm going to go with this guy. Unknown to them, other people are making the same decision. So this is again another natural centralization tendency. Jurisdictions can ask validators to censor transactions. They can prevent validation inside their areas of influence. So it's also a good idea for the blockchain to demonstrably be spread out across many jurisdictions. So it makes no sense to do this in the first place. The service provider issue, I just want to drive home that none of the stuff that I'm talking about here is somehow abstract or hasn't happened. I think everybody has heard about Tornado Cash, sanctions, etc. So not worth repeating that. But I don't know if you've heard about the Solana situation. So November 21, in the middle of Solana Breakpoint, the biggest conference of Solana in the world, on 2nd of November, Hetzner decided that it's not okay to host Solana nodes anymore. There are 40% of the nodes inside Hetzner, and they blew them all out in 5 to 10 minutes. So obviously, there was a script running in there. They detected all the nodes. And you can see the graph of delinquent stakes that's not active in consensus anymore. That gradient, that sharp uptick, that's the 40% nodes going down. Luckily, there was only 20% voting power concentrated on those nodes, so Solana stayed up. But that's a lot of nodes that were going down at a certain one time. And Hetzner has publicly declared that they are not allowing any crypto operations using their service, using their rented services. So this can happen at any time again, right? So I think as a community, we need to be aware of these risks. We need to think about these. If you agree with me that decentralization is why we are here, and it's a worthy goal to follow, and that you understand it, you do agree that it also takes some work to hit that, then I think it makes sense to think about, okay, how would we accomplish this? How do we get that? And we think there are sort of two key ingredients that have to exist. One is transparency and metrics. So someone is tracking the global state, right, of what the blockchain is looking like. And second is tooling and incentives, because without incentives, I like Mirko's talk in the morning, it very clearly stated that most people will follow the money, right? It's the guy with the highest APR and the lowest commission is the guy I want to stake on, get most of the money. Unless we make sure the community is also somehow contributing to decentralization, we could find ourselves in an unfortunate spot, right? So what are our contributions to these two areas? Area number one, metrics. So some of you may have seen the observatory. It's a website that tracks various metrics. I'll explain which ones in a little bit. But what's more important is we've released version 2 a couple of days ago, which shows a much more integrated picture of the chain and sort of gives you at a glance understanding of what the chain looks like from the outside and how it's doing on various dimensions. We focus on these 4 things which we think are important. There are a couple of others, but I'm leaving them out. There's governance, sort of how active are stakeholders in voting and discussing proposals. What's up with the performance? Is block signing going on? Pretty much everybody's showing this. We show a few extra metrics. Decentralization, meaning dispersion geographically and in service providers. And the state of public infrastructure. It's nothing to do with decentralization. And I also will refer to the talk of Yair just here before me, because we think that's an important issue outside of decentralization. So I'll just show a couple of tiles we have on the website and explain how we get this stuff. So this is a map that also Mirko showed for various blockchains. You see this dispersion across countries or dispersion across service providers. And it's actually interesting that Cosmos wasn't on this map. Cosmos-based chains weren't on that map. It's not actually easy to get this view. So you can easily query the chain to get voting power across validators, so it's easy to understand how that voting power is distributed. But once you're asking yourself, hey, where is that infrastructure located that takes part in consensus, it's significantly harder, because Comet BFT, Tendermint-based chains, don't really advertise which nodes are validators and which aren't. So what we do is we have our own version of fork Tendermint, which is instrumented to capture additional data. And we run a bunch of nodes in different data centers across the world, from like San Francisco to Sydney. And all they do is they gather voting packets. So they look at cryptographically assigned votes. They get them from many places, because Comet BFT uses a flooding algorithm to spread the votes. And we run a data science pipeline that processes all those vote timings and does statistical inference to identify where the likely node is that is sending those packets into the public permissionless network. And this is how we get these graphs, right? This is how we get these locations. So we can track down the node, which tells us the internet service provider and also tells us the geolocation. We think this is really useful, and we've put a lot of work into this. We're getting better every week. But what we should also say, and this approach has some limitations, right? So a typical situation is that a validator team will run a validator node, and that node is what's sending the packets into the public network. Some teams are using more intricate or more complicated infrastructures, which have public-facing nodes which send packets into the permissionless network, and behind them they also have some additional nodes. So these additional nodes will frequently reside on private networks, and they're not visible to the observatory, right? So we can't say anything about what's happening over there. As far as we're concerned, that's one giant big signer of packets that is transmitting those packets through these nodes, right? So these are sort of the choke points which are relaying these packets out. And we compute what's called a Nakamoto coefficient across these dimensions. The slide title says critical subsystems. This is a term that actually I saw Balaji Srinivasan use online, and we really liked it. And a critical subsystem denotes any sort of unit, any type of entity which can influence the blockchain. So we look at these 3 right here. And on the validator side, the Nakamoto coefficient here is 10. The Nakamoto coefficient is the number of entities of a certain type that have to work together to either censor transactions or stop the chain, right? And these risks appear, across these dimensions differently. So in terms of validators, both of these risks are in place. So these, 10 validators could decide, no more talking to this smart contract, or we don't like this token anymore. We're just going to go short it somewhere, and be done with it. Hopefully, none of the validators blockchains have chosen for their sets have these type of thoughts. But on the other dimensions, the risks sort of diversify. So in terms of countries, it's more like the censorship risk, because before a country decides to stop block validation in its jurisdictions, I think all of these validators can move. So it's more about the transaction censoring, right, which might not give enough incentive to move. On the ISP sides, that's really the sort of halting problem, right? So countries most of the ones that we're used to are governed by legal bodies which have some due process. Companies which provide service can change their terms of service tomorrow, right? And the CEO has a bad day and just goes, I don't want to endanger my business, we're shutting all these nodes down. So that's sort of a more immediate risk to the operation, and the top one is to the jurisdiction and transactions. This has been there for a while. We'll talk about this in more detail again in the workshop in the afternoon, and we're happy to discuss details with anybody. So let me also show the other parts we have. Governance activity. Cosmos governance, very evolved. You can emit code based on governance. Based on governance, you can halt and upgrade chains. So I mean, a lot of things hang on top of governance, and we have these scores that you can see, the vote result and the voting turnout. But it's more interesting also to look at the actual activity, right? So the green line on the top shows how validators vote compared to when they were eligible to vote. So we take the pain to actually compute when each validator was able to vote. They may not have been in the active set. They joined later, right? If you look at a block explorer, it says voted 3 times out of 20. Yeah, but if they joined 3 months ago, that's kind of okay. So we do all these numbers. We show the participation. Below this, you see the voting power, so you can immediately see what's the correlation between voting power and vote. So there's a bad validator over there on the right that's not doing any voting, and they have a lot of voting power in this network. But all that is we're just talking about validators. So if only these guys vote, that's like 50, 70, 100 people deciding on the future of this network. What about everybody else? So I actually have to zoom in to show you the excerpt there. These tiny blue spots, that's delegator wallets voting, right? So when we say the community votes, like the blue is the community outside the validators, and everything else is like the validator voting. So Cosmos governance works, just a quick recap. If a validator votes, they vote with all of their delegators' power, all of the stake that's delegated to them, unless the delegator also votes. So this is a political system I'd call like a validator oligarchy, or some sort of like parliamentary representation, but it's by no means like engaged governance. So we track this for each validator. We look at which of their delegators are voting and aren't. And even if you flip through here, can't really find a chain right now where the community votes. So my point is like this voting turnout, 76%, 80%, that's not 80% of the community. Let's be super clear on that. That's 80% of just the tiny amount of validators, right? If you have 10,000 token holders, like that, somehow you're not connecting with them. So we want to track these metrics and start a conversation about this. Last but not least, was really happy to hear Yair's talk right now from LavaNet. RPC nodes. RPC nodes were introduced by him, so I don't have to do any of that, which is brilliant. But right now, what happens is typically blockchain foundations will fund some validators, or some validators will spin up RPC nodes so that the blockchain can actually talk to the rest of the world, right? RPC nodes are how you get information in and out. So frequently, I'm not going to tell you which blockchain this is. You can go look up all of the blockchains. When you are trying to develop with a chain, you first interact with RPC nodes. A significant proportion of these RPC nodes have brain damage, and they're not talking to the developers when they're trying to develop apps. So it's no fun trying to develop against this. Yes, you can go, buy nodes somewhere, but if you're at a hackathon, if you're trying to get to the blockchain, if the blockchain is trying to attract new developers, this is not a great look. We know a lot about this because we query a lot of RPCs to get information from the chains. So in this particular case, we can actually see 43 open RPC nodes on this network. I'm hoping all of those are intended to be open. We don't know. We just see that they're open, they're accessible from us, we can ping them, we can ask them. But these that we're showing, these 7, those are registered in Cosmos directories, so we know they're public and nobody's going to start shooting at us if we show scores. Those are public, those are intended to be used by the public. There are these other nodes, which I don't know, please everybody check your validator infra if those RPC pores are supposed to be there or not. So we'll show this across blockchains. I want to call out like Axelar and Injective. If you go to the observatory, look at their RPCs, they're fun to use. 90% plus success rates in responses is really great. Like these 2 chains, they're serious about attracting developers. If you have a hackathon there, it'll be fun to develop an app, right? Some other chains, less fun. If you're debugging your app and you're trying to understand what's going on, and half the time the RPCs, it's an error in the RPC, not in your code, not fun for any developer. Speaking for a friend. Both me and my friend, we hate that. So nobody wants to build on top of broken RPC nodes. However, going back to like this outline that I had, it's all good and well to show metrics, but we're in a bear market. Situation is difficult. Our foundations and our stakeholders really using their funds, the tools that they have effectively to support like the best players that they have, active on their blockchains. We're not so sure, and we want to help rectify the situation. So the first part of this is to track things and measure them and display them for conversation. The second part is developing tools to help incentivize, make it easy to do, let's say, the right thing. So the first tool that we have is called the Smart Delegation Program, which we offer to blockchain foundations. Foundations today run their own delegation programs. They're busy with Google Sheets and tracking things and then computing things and then telling you you'll get this much stake and he's going to get that much stake. And it's a very difficult process and it's not fun to do at all. What we are trying to say, or what we're suggesting, is foundations shouldn't be doing all this mechanical work. They should be focusing on specifying and discussing out the policy. What are the things that you value? What are the things that you want to support? And we think the policies, we develop a framework for this. They should have agreements, which is partnerships. Validator A does a YouTube channel, therefore they get some sort of delegation. Then there should be sort of like eligibility criteria. You can just state, no jails for the last 90 days, or you're excluded for 90 days. Please don't get your validator jailed, or other ideas. But you can just say, what are the minimum requirements that a validator has to satisfy, and then they'll get funds from this part of the program. Number 3 is scoring, where you compare like what's more important to you. Do you want a 99% block signing rate, or 95%, or would you like decentralization to be more active, and you're willing to take slower block times, or you have to sort of work out in the community what makes sense for this blockchain. And then once you encode this tool will compare the policy with the live data view from the blockchain and just compute those allocations for you, right, based on that data policy. So there's no more computation in-house. And the last part that we have that I'll also show you is the public view. So once you specify this policy, you can just click on a URL and it'll show you a public view that's not access controlled. And anybody, any time, can look at what the parameters of the policy are and who gets what. Right? They can, and why they get it. So they can look at their scoring, and if they think something's wrong with the scoring, they can go talk to us at the observatory and say, hey, I'm raising my hand, I think this data is inaccurate. We're happy to talk to them. But based on the data, we compute those allocations. Right? I don't want to go through too many details, but just like the sort of view of the blockchain that you have when you're designing this is on the left, you specify your policy. So this is what I talked about, these locations, scale, signing ratios, whatever else you want. There are a bunch of criteria to select from. And on the right-hand side, you see a live view of the chain. So as you're changing these policies, you can always simulate what would happen if you were to apply this right now. So you can really examine sort of what are you doing by creating this policy and have a look at what the effect it has on your chain. Once you're happy with this, you can commit this and say, okay, that's a policy I'm going to be bound to, that's a policy I'm going to use, and you can also publish this out and say, okay, this is the policy we're starting to enforce right now, and these funds are governed by this type of data. Want to be clear, we don't think like all foundation funds should go into this tool. This tool focuses on decentralization, right? Just repeating this again. There are many other services validators provide, so there should definitely be some other provisions to also handle these cases, right? This is sort of the data-driven, metrics-driven, decentralization-focused view. So driving this point home, what exactly happens? Number 1, the SDP will pull data from the observatory. Number 2, it will apply the policy to compute the scoring. The scoring here is not the scoring on the observatory. That's based on our policy. But the foundation is deciding their own policy. Each foundation has a different take. So they'll compute the scores. Then they'll see what the dark bars are the current stake on each of those validators, and the light bars are the allocation to these validators. And how are those computed? So after the policy is applied, we do a very simple computation, which is take all of the stake on the chain, all of it, everything, and divide by the sum of all the scores of everybody. So we get how much stake is worth 1 score point. Those are the blue dots over there, right? So you see everybody who has the same score has the same target. However, there's a problem, which is also sort of expected. The system is decentralized, so the foundation can't actually hit those targets. They don't own that stake. Many parties are staking. But the foundation owns the light stake, right? They own the part of the stake. So then there's a more difficult computation that happens, solves a quadratic programming problem, which gets the chain, uses the foundation stake to push the chain to the best position that's as close to those blue targets as possible. So you can't hit them, but you can move the chain over there. And this allocation is not the same for everybody, right? So if you have in the decentralization sense, you want to support guys who are decentralized network, you want to have them to have the similar rewards. But some of them already start with more stake. So this is really an equalizing system. That's why we call it like a decentralization tool, because it will try to equalize everyone to these rewards, right? And if they get more stake elsewhere, then that stake can move to fund somebody else to support their decentralization. So this is not about giving everybody the same piece. This is about getting everybody to the same level. The public policy view, very simple. On top, you can see the current view of the policy, what's been set up, so everybody knows. And at the bottom, you can see all your scorings. If you mouse over with an validator, you can understand, hey, my scoring is computed like this. This is what I have, and that's what I'm getting. That's what somebody else is getting. So this is sort of what some blockchain foundations are already using. And I have a case study here of our very first customer that started using this blockchain. They're right here. You can see their booth. In the lounge. They're called Chain for Energy. I'm super happy about this use case. So when we first started working together on December 25th, the distribution of the nodes looked like on the left picture, which is, so the big red region is OVH. That's a French company. That's is a service provider where people can host their servers. And there was 45% voting power concentrated into that provider. And through discussions, work, and you can actually click on that bar and look at the list of validators. And the idea here is not to punish anybody, right? That the idea is that you can have a conversation with these people and chat with them. Hey, can we do something about this? Could you move? But just so you know who you talk to, you can use the observatory. So back to the difference in the stats. So there was over 45% inside of VH, but now today, a few days ago, if you snap a picture, they're really close to getting a Nakamoto coefficient of 3 across the ISP division, which is actually a really nice score. So 3 ISPs would have to somehow decide together to act to actually endanger the chain. And we also show a progress bar on the left. So I'm not aware of anybody else showing this, but it's like we call this Nakamoto tendency internally. But it shows you if you have a Nakamoto 2, it's a very coarse metric. It shows you if you're closer to 3 or actually closer to dropping back to 1. So they're really, really close to a Nakamoto coefficient 3. So that was one tool that we offer, which we hope can be used for part of the allocation budget of the foundations. It's being used by some foundations already to help promote decentralization. And it's also automatic in the sense, if you come to this tool and use it every 2 weeks, if a validator decides to move, they immediately get a new score. There's depending on the time period, there's sort of like a time average, and as the score starts going up, their allocation starts going up. So based on the policy, new scores get computed, and the foundation signs using a multisig, and you can keep rolling this forward. And hopefully as validators find out, yes, I am getting rewarded when I move out, hopefully they'll be incentivized to do this. So what about the community? We do have you covered. We just released a tool called Stakebar, which is doing almost exactly the same thing, but for a stakeholder audience, for like a retail audience that's maybe not so involved in the staking industry, is not able to evaluate validators as much. One of the problems that foundations know their validators, right? So they talk to their validators all the time. They've got channels. It's not like they don't know who's on the other side of the phone. On the other hand, you as stakeholders, if you ever staked using a dashboard, this opens up, say, who do you want to stake with? And there's like 100 names in there, and you have no idea, what to do here. So you go ahead and stake on the first guys because those must be trustworthy. Well, that's exactly chain centralization. The mission of Stakebar is to help stakers delegate to smaller validators that you would normally not talk to, not know about, who don't have their own resources to tweet with you or engage with you because they're doing this. They have short on manpower, but they're still doing a reasonable job. And they are helping to decentralize the chains. Look, if you think the smaller validators don't matter, why don't we kick them out of the validation set, right? Either they should be there or they shouldn't be there. If you think you need to be decentralized, they should be there. They also need some support. And if you look at the distribution of voting power on many chains, the tail is abysmal, right? It's like really not helping anybody run sustainable infrastructure or do what we'd say would like to support as good moves. So what this tool does is very simple. You just come in and you say how much you want to stake, and it will find you a portfolio of 5 validators, and it will recommend, hey, why don't you stake on these guys? We'll split your funds 2020, 2020. And this also diversifies your staking, right? We understand you might be nervous staking on smaller validators. You have never heard of them. So that's why we build you a portfolio from the get-go. You're diversified. All you have to do is press stake, and you're good to go. The system has a nice feature at the bottom right called Nakamoto Boost. So if you switch that on, it will exclude all validators which are contributing to the Nakamoto coefficient. So it will remove all the top 10 guys in case of, like chains like Migaloo. It will remove the top 7 guys, as far as I know right now in Cosmos. Now make sure you don't add more stake to them. You only add stake beyond the chain. So when you stake, unless you stake like $1 million, you're pretty much guaranteed to increase the Nakamoto coefficient of the chain. And you're likely, delegating to guys who are outside these like hotspots that we're talking about. We're actually right now running a community challenge with White Whale with their Megaloo blockchain. As far as I know, it's the first experiment of this kind. We're trying to get the community to help decentralize the chain, and we're asking them, hey, is this something that's actually important to you? Would you like to contribute to moving to chain out? So there are some targets: get the Nakamoto coefficient to 11, get it to 12, and reduce voting power reliance on Hetzner and OVH to somewhere like 40%, starting at 60% Monday. So last Monday. This is when this thing starts. I'm actually really excited about how this is going. We haven't hit Nakamoto 11 yet, but we're so close, right? So if you look at the Nakamoto tendency, so last Monday, it's super close to dropping to 9. Right now, it's like 15% to 11, right? If we've already gone 85% of the way, and that's based on communities using observatory tooling, using blockchain explorers to understand like which validators are on the top. And we chart and staking with the validators on the bottom. There was 2 million extra whales staked since Monday, and also 2 validators just upped and left out of the hotspots during this campaign. So Notional and Vault Stakes have decided to leave and switch. One of them switched to Canada, and the other switched to Hanoi, to Vietnam. So that's the voting. 8% of the entire voting power of this chain just moved in the middle of this campaign. So this is a great result for us because we love to see change happen. It's great to talk about metrics and talk about measurements, but actually ultimately what we want to do is we want to hope to help these chains improve their posture, help them decentralize. So it is happening right now on Megaloo. We're super stoked about that. So this difference is entirely due to the community. So what's up with the name Stakebar? You might be thinking bar. Yes, there is a bar here, which will get you a drink if you follow us on Stakebar and show us that you followed us on Twitter, the Stakebar account. Saying that, it's the only drink in the house which has an alcohol kick to it. So please only follow us one time, okay? Can we make that deal? It's gin and tonic if you're into that at all. Just show us that you're following this. And cheers if you stake using Stakebar and you're helping decentralize and secure the network. So to summarize, why we're developing these tools, why we're doing all of this, we do think that decentralization matters. We think that it's work because it's going against like what we normally find when people compete, right? When people try to provide good service. And we think that transparent metrics will help. It's not the whole story. Conversations need to happen, and communities need to decide if they're in or out. And even if communities want to help, there needs to be an incentive structure to support this. Because if there isn't, we're trying to whip up people to go and do something that's not beneficial to them. I don't think that's going to work so much. We need to explain why that makes sense, and we need to incentivize people to go and take a look. And hopefully there'll be more tools cropping up. It's not going to be just us, but there'll be more ideas of how to help this. And that'd be a future I'd like to see for Cosmos. So thank you very much. That's all I have. And you can reach us on Twitter or by anywhere you want. And we're always happy to talk all things decentralization. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. We actually have a lot of questions.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we will be able to go through all of them.
If we don't, I'm happy to stay right here and talk to anybody who had questions, okay?
But the first one that actually multiple people are curious is there any fee from your side using Stakebar?
No.
Okay, that was fast. Great. Another one is, can you show a well-decentralized chain versus poorly decentralized? How clear is the difference?
So the differences are pretty big. I prefer if you guys use the observatory and looked at it for yourselves. And again, the observatory isn't perfect. It's not the end-all of everything. It's an information tool we think is useful. You should look at it and then walk into the channel of the blockchain and start a conversation about this. Chat with people. That's the sort of stuff we'd like to look. I don't want to call out names here. So look at the dashboard.
Okay, another one is what has been validator reaction to the observatory deployment of stake?
Excuse me? What has validator reaction
to observatory deployment of stake?
Haven't seen that much of the reactions. Have seen some reactions to how we score things, how we look at data. Have seen some people say it's great to see the chain decentralized. Can't pick out exactly any. I haven't seen anybody staking, oh, we're so happy about this or we're not so happy about this, and them being a validator.
All right, and I think the last one, given the time, is do you show coefficient for censoring and stopping versus corrupting behavior?
No, so we'll put out more docs around the observatory. So we only compute these Nakamoto coefficients, and we're surfacing, or we're saying that there are different risks associated with difference of these critical dimensions, right? So it's one number, but it informs sort of different risks depending on the dimension.
All right. Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. And again, more questions directly to Martin.
Yes,
we will have lunch soon, so
thank you.
Thank you.